Brad, welcome into the game. I hope you're doing well.
Yeah, all is well. We're getting close, and that's what we're all waiting for. I guess the next thing on our docket, I know you were on standby for some sort of announcement from Nick Saban, whether that comes before the guy trots out there for the opening snap or not remains to be seen. But elsewhere, I think we're kind of on Urban Meyer watch. So as much as that story has kind of died down, or at least gotten quiet in the last few days, we're expecting something from that group by the end of the day Friday, and then after we get that one behind us, then I think we can start moving on to on the field.
Brad, so right now, if you're sitting there at the campus of ESPN in Bristol, that's the number one conversation is Urban Meyer?
Yeah, I think that's the most significant thing right now in college football. I mean, when you're talking about one of the top playoff contending teams, coached by, I think, inarguably one of the three best coaches in the game at this point, and his status for the not only the season opener, but for his career, kind of at least at that school, is up in the air right now. So obviously, it's a big story for that reason, and it seems like there are at least three different directions it could go as far as nothing happens, suspension, termination. I don't know if there are others, but those three obviously are all in play, and so it's a big deal, and we're waiting to hear what happens.
Brad, do you have a lean on which way you think it'll go?
Well, I do, but it's not based on any inside info. It's just it's based on the assumption that there is some element of truth in the statement that Urban put out. I don't know what it was, almost 2 weeks ago, when he said that he admitted that he lied at Big Ten Media Days, but he said that he did know, and that his superiors or whoever he was responsible for reporting it to knew. And if that's the case, if that's not another lie, then I don't really think he's going to get fired. I guess my expectation would be that there will be some level of suspension, because it seems that whatever you come up with, it's hard to argue that he shouldn't have done more, whether he was legally obligated to by Title IX or by the terms of the contract. He probably should have done more, and for that I think he'll get suspended. I don't think he'll get fired unless he very clearly violated those terms, and in order for him to have done that, he would have had to have lied again in that statement.
Brad, let me go back to this quarterback thing here in Tuscaloosa. We almost think it's done, but we should not be counting Jalen Hurts out. Either way, when a guy throws 4 touchdowns, 0 picks, the other guy throws 3 interceptions and no touchdowns in the first scrimmage, leading into the second scrimmage, which is going to be more of a run-type oriented scrimmage. It's the Red Elephant Club scrimmage because it's going to be more open to the public. Plus, it's a club scrimmage, so a lot of that stuff kind of gets out. Nick Saban probably going to do a lot of run packages. There's not much that Jalen could do other than just sort of hold on. Your thoughts on the quarterback situation here in Tuscaloosa?
Well, I'm seeing and hearing some of the stuff that you are, and that's kind of the impression I'm getting is that barring Jalen going out and doing something spectacular, which that's not really his MO. I mean, his thing is not making mistakes, being steady. And I'm just guessing that if that is true, that he threw 3 picks in the last scrimmage, it's probably because he was pressing in a way that he normally doesn't in game situations, feeling like he had to make plays, which I guess is something that in general he's probably been always coached not to try to do. So if that's where we are, and it is looking like Tua, then I think ultimately what it comes down to, not to suggest by any means that it wasn't decided or at least confirmed by what happened here in August, but just going back to the playoff last year, I was looking at the pass attempts by both guys, and one thing that really stood out to me is the way that Tua, in just one half and one overtime possession, spread the ball out compared to what Jalen did in the Clemson game in the first half of the Georgia game. And I think right there you kind of see the difference in the two, both against really good competition. First of all, you had Tua getting the ball to more receivers. I think there were 9 different guys who caught passes from him in that second half in OT of the Georgia game. But it was the only game all season that Alabama's top 6 wideouts all caught a pass in the same game, and they all caught one from Tua in that second half in OT. And then the other thing is just looking at where on the field he delivers the ball. And he did a much better job of stretching the field is maybe kind of implying that it's all deep and down the field, but it's even more the intermediate routes. Jalen was more heavy on the shorter passes, where Tua certainly threw some of those, but there was more of a distribution between short, intermediate, and deep. And I just think all in all, he's less predictable in terms of where he's likely to go with the ball, and obviously that makes your offense better.
Let me go into this hypothetical question. If that is the case, and that little small sample size can be applied to the 12 regular season games, what's the potential of this offense in Tuscaloosa?
Well, I think if the offensive line is a little better than it was last year, then I think it's tremendous. Because I don't think anybody would argue that they are very deep at running back, very deep at receiver, and so there are a lot of talented guys you can put the ball in the hands of. So as long as the offensive line is doing its part and opening up running lanes, protecting the quarterback, if you've got a QB who's capable of spreading the ball around and getting it into everyone's hands, getting them all involved, then I don't know how many teams on that schedule really have a chance to stop them. And look, if they end up being that type of offense, I mean, like clearly one of the 5 best offenses in college football, if not even above that, then this is going to be one of those that from the end of September on, people are just going to be licking their chops over the possibility of Alabama Clemson 4 and a chance to see that offense against this Clemson defense, which has really gotten the bulk of the attention in the offseason, just how good that defensive line especially is going to be. That's going to be a matchup that everyone will be salivating over, on top of just the uniqueness of having 2 teams go head-to-head in the playoff for a 4th consecutive year, which would be great in itself. But this has the potential to be an epic matchup of offense versus defense. I think we know Clemson's defense is going to be there in that category. The question is whether Alabama's offense will.
How big of a gap do you think there is between Clemson and Alabama and those rest of that tier of college football playoff teams? How big of a gap is it between those?
I think that's a tough one to call right now, because I don't think that there's a huge gap talent-wise between Alabama and Clemson and, say, Georgia and Ohio State. I think that those teams could be just as good. Now, there's some questions there, obviously, with Ohio State on top of the, will Urban Meyer be there question. I think you also look at some of their results from the past 2 years, and while you recognize that they're extremely talented, you wonder how is it that they're capable of laying eggs like they do sometimes. Or the Iowa game last year, where they didn't show up. Obviously, in the playoff, the lopsided loss to Clemson the year before that. Even Clemson, I should throw them in because, for as much as we have to give them credit for what they've done the last 3 years, 2 years in a row, they have just had a clunker of a loss, to Syracuse a year ago and then at home against Pitt the year before that. And really, if you break it down, Alabama is the only team in college football that doesn't have a habit of doing that once every 2 or 3 years, going out there and losing to some team they got no business losing to. And that's why they've been contending for national titles almost every single November for the last decade. But you look at Georgia, and I think with Georgia, the one question here, and I think we've talked about this before, the similarity in the trajectory from Kirby first 2 years there and Saban first 2 years at Alabama. Not just the success on the field very quickly, but also the way that they've recruited, and all that is it's all well and good. But I think the next step, the next thing that Kirby has to prove for that comparison to continue, is that he can do what Saban has done over and over and over since his first 2 years, which is to have to replace a bunch of starters on one side of the ball and then basically have no drop-off in the production the following year. And we've seen it, like I said, over and over with Alabama. If Georgia's defense can do that this year, where it's just, you know what, got all this talent, we're just going to reload. Most of the time it doesn't happen, even with really talented teams. For whatever reason, Alabama has always been able to do it under Saban. If Georgia can do it, then I think they're going to be right there in the mix again, and we could end up with a huge SEC championship game when it finally arrives in December.
Brad, let me ask you with Heisman odds here for a couple of minutes. A lot of Tua hype here from a local standpoint, but a lot out in Las Vegas as the Heisman favorite. I mean, can you remember? You've been in this business since the early 1990s, and I know that's not been that long ago. But help me. Can you remember a guy going in as the Heisman favorite with this little of a sample size? I know it's a national championship stage, but can you recall another guy with this few snaps as the Heisman favorite in college football?
I can't. Because normally for a guy who has never started to be one of the Heisman frontrunners, it would have to be a situation where that team, usually the offense, has proven to be pretty potent year after year after year, and he's just next in line to be the starter. Now, what often happens in those situations is that after an offense has done it over and over and over, just rotating new guys through that position, there becomes this assumption that it's just the system. So if you've got a quarterback who, let's just say the next quarterback, well, this is a bad example from a Heisman standpoint, but let's say Texas Tech. Okay. Whoever the quarterback is at Texas Tech, the guy's going to throw for a ton of yards. And we're way past the point of assuming that this guy's awesome. We just know that offense is conducive to, throwing for 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns. That's just kind of what they do because they hardly run the ball. And so it's the same thing with a really good team. And just plug the next quarterback in, and because of the nature of what they do, he's going to rack up a lot of yards. And if they have a good defense, then that guy by default is going to be in the Heisman race. That's not what we have here because Alabama, while they've had a couple of Heisman winners, they were both running backs. Alabama has not had this history of quarterbacks who have put up big numbers, and I'm not even sure that Tua will put up huge numbers. I would expect that if he is the quarterback, he'd be very efficient. We know. Look, Alabama's still going to run the ball a lot. That's what they do. At the very least, they're going to be balanced. And then on top of it, because they're so good on both sides of the ball and so much better than the competition, there are going to be several games where he hardly plays in the second half. Whoever the starting quarterback is for Alabama will have several games where he hardly plays in the second half. And you put those two together, and it's like, well, I think he'd have to be pretty special in order to win it, and there'd have to be a couple of big games where he really showed out. But does it make sense for him to be pretty high up that list? I think it does.
Hey, Brad, just a big credit to your network, Training Days, Rolling with the Tide. I know we had a chance to watch the first episode last week. The second episode appears tonight, 7 o'clock on the Eastern time, 6 o'clock locally here in Tuscaloosa. Training Days, Rolling with the Tide, presented by AT&T, episode number 2 on ESPN 2. Did you have a chance to take a look at episode number 1? Did anything?
I have not. No, I haven't seen it yet. I'll probably just take some time next week and just kind of go through everything at once. But no, I have not really caught it. What would have been your thoughts so far?
Oh, it's just it's always fun to go behind the scenes. And Bo Mattingly, which I know that you know because I see you making appearances out in Arkansas. I think he's the producer, which is the same guy that did the Arkansas documentary a few years ago. There, but to me, it just you learn how the sausage is made. You peel the onion back, the curtain. It's fun to get that inside, and you kind of just look at things from a different perspective. It's good to keep that camera rolling, even when us normal low life media guys are kicked out.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that one of the reasons Saban agreed to do it, I'm assuming, Sometimes it's bad to assume things with Saban, but it seems like what one of his goals here would have been is that, not only to just profile the players and what it's like inside the program, which is obviously good for recruiting, but also for himself personally to show that
great point.
He's not the guy that you see standing behind the podium with the Coke bottle in front of him, who's, always or almost always ornery about something, and that's the impression that I think most people around the country have of him. And I think it's an opportunity for people to see a more personal side of him that they don't often get to see. I mean, we always joke in the media about how rarely he smiles. I'm not saying he smiles a lot more inside the building, but I'm guessing between the building and the practice field, you probably get a lot more, light moments out of him than you do on the sideline when all the cameras are on him during games. So I'm guessing that's another part of what they're going for.
No, 100%. And that's been the off-season message, that we do, we as in them, they have fun inside that football building, which has been a kind of a stereotype that's out there that's not the case. But I think they're trying to counter that message as social networks. They've taken it to another level. Brad Edwards, I appreciate you for being a part of the show. Thank you so much, and we'll look forward to catching up maybe one more time before the season starts. I appreciate you for being a part of the show. Thank you, sir.
All right. Sounds good, Ryan. Take care.